Hello, I'm Simulated Irk and welcome back to Train Sim World. Today we are continuing our time on the London Overground on the Mildmay line, otherwise known as the North London line. So we've got another scenario to do. Getting used to things again on a simulated train after playing lots of simulated tram action that is also available on Simulated Irk. It's one thing I haven't done lately, actually, is Simulated Train Sim Classic. This scenario is called Normal Day in the Office. We'll be using the class 378 Capitalstar. Welcome to your afternoon shift. Today you'll be running a typical overground service from Wilston Junction to Stratford. It's a rainy winter day, so expect wet rails and reduced visibility as you navigate through the route. Stay sharp and adjust your braking distances, and I didn't get to read the rest of that one. Alright, so we're not set up. Master key to on. Reverser to neutral. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up our... I actually remembered. So set up our driver safety systems. Vigilance, normal. Traction interlock, normal. Driver's safety systems, normal. AWS, that's now normal, as we can hear from the Alright, so AWS is now on, which we didn't have in the last episode. We'll set the reverser now to forward. We'll unlock doors on the right.
Safety announcement. Due to today's wet weather, please take extra care while traveling. Surfaces.
We'll set up our lights, headlights, day running. Alright, let's go. So we're about to go onto a 35 board, 20 board at the moment. Against W for wipers. No, wiper. Alright. Wipers are on. Sometimes wipers can be more trouble than they're worth. Now, a lot of modern trains in these conditions can be difficult to drive. They can be slow to take off and have a bit of wheel spin when they're taking off. And then when they're stopping, sometimes the computer says no. Sometimes the wheel slides can be very, very big, especially when it's light rain. This looks to be heavier rain, and it looks to have been raining for a while. But when it comes to, if it's been hot and dry, for instance, and then it's raining, well, that's when it can be very, very slippery. There's certain types of trains that would be notorious for it, but sometimes even the most prepared driver can get unstuck. And compared to the last episode at Kendall Green, we did alright. I'm liking the rain, the sounds, and also the way that it looks. Now, it might sound counterintuitive, but when it's been raining for a while and the rails aren't as slippery, it can actually be better compared to if it's only just started to rain and the rails are hot and greasy, and then all of a sudden add a bit of water and it becomes really greasy. So it makes a little bit of difference to me having AWS on. Adds that extra little bit of realism. The AWS Advanced Warning System, for anyone who doesn't know, who may be a new viewer, is one that gives a guide to the signals ahead. It's advanced warning, as the name suggests. So that was a single happy beep, indicating that this signal up ahead is clear. Getting on and off the train can be hazardous for passengers in this situation. So that's the signal there. And we've already had our advance warning for that one. Now, before the next signal, you may see in between the two rails a balise, and the balise is a location where, here's one now, and that was a balise, an AWS balise for the signal here, and that single beep that you heard tells me that the signal is clear and it's not a restricted signal or a stop signal. So our station is coming up now. It's a short distance between these two. And there's another one. Happy beep now. What can be tempting sometimes, especially if you've been running what we call stick for stick. You know, you're following closely behind another train, so you're seeing a lot of caution signals. And then you see a green one, and you hear that happy beep because the beep that you get for a caution or a caution turnout or a stop signal is different, it could be tempting to power up, forgetting that you're on your way into a station. So that's where road knowledge comes into it. So we may see what happens a little bit further on down the track if we do get some caution signals or turnout signals, and how the AWS can help me slow down and realise that there's a more restrictive signal coming up. Hit the wrong button and I turn the reverser off. Leave the reverser off. So what will happen if you run over that believes if it's a caution signal, a caution turnout signal or a stop signal, the tone changes and you have to acknowledge there's the happy, what I call the happy beep for this green signal coming up here. But if you run over it and it's a different tone, well then you have to also acknowledge the sunflower. Now I'll point out the sunflower again if we see it. It's to the left hand side of the speedo. The black circle above the speaker. Yeah, we got into the brakes a bit late there. We're still on the platform, but we are over where we should be. So just above the speaker, a black circle, that's the sunflower. The sunflower is not lit at the moment, but if there is a stop signal or a caution signal, that sunflower will light up as a reminder to tell you that you're coming up to a restricted signal. It's one of the things that I'm glad that English trains have, that I'm a bit sad my trains in Australia don't have. It's an added warning for the signals ahead. Now in default, in Train Sim World, they are turned off. Doesn't matter what mode you're in. I think you should have an option in the menu to turn your safety systems on or off by default. Another happy beep for the green signal, because it can be very handy if you can't actually see the signal up ahead because it's around the corner, for instance. Finchley Road's our next stop, and it's right on us already. So we're running well. Oh, they actually have an analog clock on the screen when the driver's controls aren't, when the door controls aren't there, when the train's moving. Now, visibility so far hasn't been too bad. And that's where things like road knowledge come on. AWS is a helpful tool. I was talking in the last episode, and I have to talk about landmarks for your powering, shutting off and braking. Now in reduced visibility, it's a lot easier to pick an option that you'll be able to see in most conditions, like a signal for instance, or a bridge. Rather than something like a billboard by the side of the tracks, for instance. We're a bit over again. I just didn't get into it early enough. So I'll actually show you how far we're over. So we've got the front door off, and the second door is just on. Now that wasn't sliding, that was just an example. You think you've got it, but you don't quite have enough brakes on. So there's a, where did I see that station sign up? There, if I can zoom in. Oh, we'll lock our doors now, that's the back of the train. Oops, I went into emergency. So sometimes it's better to have too much brakes on, and then you can always reduce the brakes. We do have a 20 board halfway to the next station, so I'm not going to go flat out and try and hit the speed limit. After all, it's a limit, not a target. So it's a slow entry into Gospel Oak. Our 20 board is there, and we're just a tad over. We're okay now. Some things that sometimes don't translate well, like there's a slight downgrade at this platform. You might not necessarily be able to feel it. Yeah, certainly a dark and gloomy day. Oh, Gospel Oak, this is the start of the line to Barking Riverside, if I remember correctly. That's a train over on the far side. So that's a connection. what some trains have is selective door opening, and also part of that selective door opening is not being able to open the doors on the incorrect side. Now there's a station we come to a little bit later on where we've been stopping at stations for ages on the left. Then there's a station that comes up on the right instead. So I'm still learning these stations. I record in batches now, so it's not as if I'm recording one episode, waiting a week, forgetting everything about the line, and then coming back and recording the next week. Happy beep, but we're braking for the station. Brake notch free is pulling up nicely. That definitely on the left hand side looks like a warning sign for leaves. I mentioned it a couple of times on the last episode. That's what that looks like on the left hand side in that triangle. Either that, or it's a warning sign for maybe it's a warning sign for like slippery location or something. It's something that I haven't seen before on Train Sim World in either the underground or overground versions. That may be a new thing. You know, it's way too close to the station to remind you of a braking point, but it may remind you of a... Whoa, I forgot about... Was there a 20 there? I think there was, that I totally forgot about. That's where a thing like ETCS, the European Train Control System, would certainly come in handy. Especially the levels that have the speed hook to remind you what the speed limit is, because the speed limit does change often. Camden Road next. We should be still on the platform, but they're probably... Yeah, we're still on. Now, cab's off, but we're still on. One thing that I've noticed so far is that both of the scenarios have been running from Willesden Junction to Stratford. So we've run in our two scenarios on this line so far. We have run in the same direction. Caledonian Road next. Oh, we're still on that 20 board. And that could be a danger too with the slower speed boards, is that you're at the station and you could well be at the station for a minute and you've gone from, you know, driver's mode of you know, thinking about the station entry and that you're on a 20 board, and then you go into what I'll call guard mode, where, you know, you've been opening and closing the doors, and, you know, you could well be at the station for a minute, and short-term memory can happen to the best of us. Oh, we're still on a 20 board, but there's some workers, but you've been in guard mode. You close the doors, you go back to driver mode, and then it's a case of, oh, I forgot I'm on a 20 board, and that's where things like ETCS will help. You know, to prevent overspeeds like that. We've got a station coming up, so I'm not going to get too excited. We've got one more signal to go, which is this one. This may well indeed be a good braking marker for this station. Yeah, it takes, in real life, it takes many times riding over this line, driving this line to get everything right. Okay, this is the station I was talking about where we've had lots of times opening the doors on the left. Now we have to open them on the right once we pull up. And off we go. Highbury and Islington next. It's actually a very interesting video that I was watching on YouTube this morning. I had seen it before, but I just needed a bit of background noise while I was doing some editing. And it was an interview between a London Underground driver and a long distance driver who drives long distances, the Azumas and whatnot for LNER. And it was an interesting comparison between the two, between someone who is a tube driver on the Northern Line, spends their time going in and out of tunnels all day, going backwards and forwards over the one section of the London Underground, the Northern Line, albeit with the different branches. Oops, I went one too far into emergency then. And so, you know, maximum trip might be an hour, and of that hour you might spend 30 minutes of an underground. And comparing that to the LNER driver, who's based in Newcastle upon Tyne. And so he was explaining about how he's based in Newcastle, but for instance, goes all the way down to London King's Cross in one direction. So that's his road knowledge in that direction, heading south out of Newcastle, and then heading north out of Newcastle. He'd also be qualified for places like Aberdeen and Edinburgh. And then there were some diversionary routes as well that he had to keep his road knowledge on, and it was quite interesting to notice the difference and hear the differences between the underground driver who would at the most be in the seat for an hour compared to the mainline driver who'd be in the chair for, you know, I think 3 hours 10 was his maximum. And the tube driver wasn't driving like this. Yeah, that just got away from me. I didn't have enough brakes in. Where the train does most of the work, the driver opens and closes the doors and supervises on the Northern Line, so they're not manually driving the train like I am here, or the LNER video driver, or the driver on the LNER, how he was describing, you know, where he was describing being in the countryside and driving up to 125 miles an hour, 200 kilometres an hour. And how he has to know all of the tracks, the gradients, etc., the different weather conditions, the difference between driving at night and driving during the day, driving services that are express compared to services that stop all stations, that sort of thing. It was a very interesting video, easily found on YouTube. There's a good collaboration actually between the LNER and also the tube driver, where they both do the same thing, but their worlds are very, very different. And it was quite an interesting video. As I said, I've watched it once already. I watched about half of it this morning as I was preparing for this video, for this batch of videos. So we've got a 45 just before the platform, but I'll be stopping anyway, so... You know, even subtle differences like the amount of space that a tube driver has in their cab, you know, which would be a little bit smaller than what we have here, compared to the size of the cab on the Azuma that we've seen before at Train Sim World. So the LNER driver was saying, you know, it's totally different world. Yeah, that got away from me in the last minute too. And it had even come to the point where the tube driver says to the long distance driver, "Oh, you know, this sounds really impressive. I might have to give this a go." And that would be like between the difference between me driving a suburban train compared to driving an inner city train, and then driving a long distance regional train, or for that matter driving a freight train, which would be totally different again. But the thing about a good driver is that if you were sitting alongside an experienced driver, it would be, you think to yourself, you're watching this person drive the train and they make it look so easy, but you know, it's all the training and all the experience that they've had up to that point which makes it look easy. Now when you first do it, it's certainly not that easy, and there's another video that I haven't watched yet. Tim Dunn, the English railway historian, I must watch this video this afternoon at some point and share my thoughts about it later on in this batch. LNER put him on a simulator, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes. Actually, I might watch that after this episode. Now I think my HUD might be broken on the right hand side because it's not showing me anywhere near the station, or unless that set me up for the next, although that might have set me up for the next station. So that's the thing, sitting next to an experienced driver, make it look easy, but it's the days, it's the days like this. It's the days like this that aren't easy. Now, because I put the reverser into neutral again, you can actually see the sunflowers now lit, and that will remain lit until I pass the next police. So this black and yellow sunflower, that they call it a sunflower, on the left hand side, so that reminds me, well in this case it's telling me that I need to run past the police to clear that. So that's what the sunflower looks like. Now in my trains, if I put the train into, it's not called neutral, or the sunflowers disappear because we ran over the police. On this train it's called neutral, on my trains it's called off. When you're just coasting. Sorry, that's a mistake you can make too, mixing up the terms between the reverser and the master controller. On this occasion I'm thinking of the master controller being in the off position, so coasting, where I should be talking about the reverser being in off, which is the same as the master controller being in neutral here. So if I put my reverser on my trains into the off position, well, apart from the fact I don't have a sunflower anyway, but that doesn't basically restart the train again in terms of, oh well, I have to wait for the train to run over Belize to reset the sunflower. That's where terminology can get a bit confusing, because you're talking about the two very, very different Two very different things. The off position in the master controller, or the combined power brake controller, and also the off position in the reverser. Alright, we've got 0.7 of a mile to go before our next station. There's a 25 halfway to the next station, so after this signal, at the next signal there's a 25 board, so I should start preparing for that. Which I've done. So now it's just a case of not creeping up. So still got a happy beep. So at that signal there's a 25 board. Yeah, they're not, the speed boards aren't necessarily always at a signal. Now I come in and I've already got the train at a lower speed because of the 25 board. Station's just around the corner. Happy beep for the next signal. So at this signal there's also a speed board on it. Now in my experience where I am, they usually don't mount the actual speed board on the signal. They'll put it next to the signal on a separate post. So I can take off. In theory, I can take off and just worry about the 40 board now. But we are coming up to Stratford, our final stop. Now we've got one signal, and then at the following signal is a 20, then another signal, and then there's a 15. And we may get to see AWS in action here. So we've got this clear signal, and then at the next signal is a 20 board, so I'm going to start slowing down for the 20 board. So I've slowed down for the 20 board, crossing over these points. Now that beep was to warn me that there's a caution signal coming up, and so I had to acknowledge it using the vigilance button, and then the sunflower stays on to remind me that I'm coming up to a caution signal. At this signal there's a 20, but we're well under it, so we'll just roll in. There's a 20 board next to the signal, and the route indicator says that we're going to the left. So we should have another... Well, that looks bumpy. So we should have another signal, then a 15 board, which we've already prepared for, and then the platform. So a caution signal. So again, acknowledge the noise. You heard it was a different noise than the happy beep. Route indicator indicating that we're going on to platform 1. The previous route indicator was saying we're just going around to the left. So we know we're going on to platform 1. Just going to take the brakes off. I was coming in a bit too slow then, so I'll speed up just a tad. So it's been about 47 minutes of recording time. So last episode was a bit longer because we did go through the introduction and the introduction to the class 378. So we'll just come in nice and slowly into Stratford. Yeah, we won't see another signal. There's the 15 board that we've already prepared for. There's a bit of water between the rails. There's certainly a bit of water around. And sometimes water will pull up like this. Alright, just a final bit of brake. Doors open on the right. Certainly a stormy day. I drove much better on this occasion. A couple of minor slip-ups. And that should be end of scenario. Well done, you've successfully completed your afternoon service, navigating through tricky weather and keeping the passengers safe and on time. It may have been a wet and gloomy day, but you handled it like a pro. That wraps up your shift. Time to clock out and head home. Great work today. So that is done. I wonder if that appears, doesn't matter how well you drive. I did get a gold medal for that one though. Interestingly, it's just said that I'm level 5 on the main line, East Coast main line between Peterborough and Doncaster, but I'm driving the Mildmay line on London Overground. Level 28 for me, level 5 for East Coast main line, and it also should be the Mildmay line and the class 378. So that was 11, almost 12 miles, 48 and a half minutes. I've been Simulated Irk. Thank you very much for watching. We will see our next scenario is called Engineering Works. So we'll see what that is next time. I've been Simulated Dirk. You've been wonderful. Thanks for watching. Ta-ta and farewell. Stay safe. Stay behind the yellow line. Bye for now.